Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Patty Brennan Show. Whether you have $20 or $20 million, this show is for those of you who want to protect, grow, and use your assets to live your very best lives. Joining me today is my friend Lee Cohen from New York Life Investments. Talk about protecting and growing. New York Life Investments sure knows how to do that, don't you, Lee?
Oh, yes, we do. I appreciate you having me.
Thanks so much for being here. So here's a question. You know, people who are listening and watching today might be thinking, what are you doing, Patty Brennan, talking to an insurance company about portfolio management?
Sure.
You know, we work with many firms, you know, the JP Morgans and the Vanguards and the Fidelities of the world.
Sure.
Why should we be listening to New York Life Investments?
It's a great question. And what I love about that question is people know New York Life as a AAA rated, very large, mutually owned insurance company, right? People know that story. But the way you stick around for over 180 years like we've had is by being good at money management, being able to identify how we need to manage our own industry money and how we manage our money as a company, but then translate it to the people that matter most, which is the policyholders, right?
You know, what's really interesting, and it's funny, until you just said it, I didn't make that connection because you and I did a podcast earlier and talked about what a wholesaler does, what the relationship is all about, and how you've differentiated yourself from everybody else who's calling my firm saying, you know, aren't we great? Recommend us to your clients.
Right.
You never did that. You are much more interested in what we are trying to provide for our clients. And it really comes down to that mutual company, doesn't it?
Absolutely does.
So, folks, for those of you who may not be in the industry, what's the difference between a mutual company and a stock company? Lee, take it away.
So it's very important, right? Because stock companies are owned by shareholders, right? If you buy a share of Amazon, you own a piece of Amazon, right? If you are part of a mutually owned company, the people that buy the policies themselves, the policy owners of an insurance company, life insurance policy or an annuity, right? They are the quote unquote decision makers of a mutually owned company. So within a stock company, the shareholders are the most decision makers, right? But within a mutually owned company, it's the policyholders themselves that are the ones that make the decisions, and the company itself wants to benefit the policyholders rather than the shareholders. I think that's important with how we consult at New York Life Investments because we want our policyholders to be happy. We want to consult with them, make sure that they have what they need.
And you know, when you think about shareholders, right? Yeah, they may own the company, but they're not really decision makers.
Sure.
I mean, these proxy votes come out and nobody really votes.
Right.
It's hard to know what's going on with Amazon, for example. I don't know. I let them run the company, right? Whereas with life insurance company, the way that New York Life manages its own portfolio is for the benefit of the policyholders. So they answer to the policyholders.
Right.
And I do think that that's a big difference because it affects the dividends that are paid on the policies.
Correct.
They want to maintain a higher than average dividend payout, things of that nature.
Right.
So that's really interesting in the way that you approach the relationship between, you know, New York Life Investments and us as the advisor,
right,
which translates to our relationship with our clients. So to give all of you a feel for how this all started, in the prior podcast, Lee told the story of us making a trade for one client into one of their investments, a convertible bond fund. We were doing tax loss harvesting for that particular client. Every portfolio that we take care of is customized. So my chief investment officer wanted to move out of one investment into another. On his own, he did a deep dive in terms of what alternatives would be appropriate for this client. He selected a New York Life investment, one trade, not a lot of money, that started this whole relationship. And Lee wanted to introduce himself, see how he could help. And what was interesting to me is that, for about a year, I don't think you talked about your investments at all.
I don't think I did either.
So let's walk everybody through the process that you go through.
Sure.
And maybe kind of you and I can banter back and forth like we did in the beginning.
Right.
You mentioned in the previous podcast of, talking to senior management about our firm, and they were like, oh my goodness, that's an opportunity you don't want to waste.
Sure.
And I thought it was interesting. I didn't know that, but now in hindsight, now I get it.
Right.
In terms of how you approached us and how you wanted to learn more about our process, what makes us different, why we are different, and why we've grown the way that we've grown, why the demand is so high.
Yeah, I agree. And it's one of those things where I think being consultative, it's the reason why we call ourselves advisor consultants and not wholesalers at New York Life Investments, because consultative approaches, I think, are the way that you get to an ultimate goal of a solution, right? All of your clients are different. Every advisor is different. Every need is different. So I think it's important that when I first get to know an advisor, or even just servicing an advisor, you need to ask a lot more questions than you need to talk about more product, right? The world moves fast. Clients' lives move fast. And if we aren't keeping up with what's important now for both your practice and the client's practice, that's only beneficial to me. So I remember that when we first sat down with your team, I think I asked more questions than I said of anything. And that's what I think was so strong about our relationship, right? I finally got to know you. So when the time came for something that fits your practice, I already knew because I had all the information I needed from you and your team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was interesting. So what are some of the questions that you would ask?
I think the first thing I do as an advisor consultant is trying to know the room, right? Every personality is different. I walk into some meetings where an advisor wants to talk to me for 3 hours. I sometimes have 2 minutes. I think understanding my surroundings of what I have at hand, where do I have the time to be consultative, or do I need to figure it out on the fly, right? I think that's the interesting part about this business. But realistically, first, knowing my client, right? Knowing the personality. Once I do that, and once I identify the approach as I get to know that person, then allows me to really take the course. I ask a lot of questions because I think it's important to know what your demographic looks like. Every advisor has a different client base. They have different needs or at different points in their career. Once I could peel back that onion and know what is applicable to you and your practice, that allows me to then figure out, okay, we have solutions, but then I won't go into a solution yet. I need to make sure that if I'm going to present something, I have full confidence to know that it should be applicable to Key Financial or anyone else I'm talking to. So process number one is try to get to know my audience. Process number two, ask a lot of questions. And then finally identify if we have a fit of a product, great. If not, here's something maybe I can recommend outside of our firm that could help you in your practice today.
It's interesting. As I think back over the term of our relationship,
sure,
so much of what you've provided to us is the intellectual content. I have to tell you, the stuff that you have sent us has been amazing. Folks, what I have, and what is dog-eared for those of you who are listening and not watching, I have Post-it notes all over this stuff. The content that you guys produce is so great.
We appreciate
I
that.
send a letter every 90 days. I have been doing that for over 30 years.
Right.
To come up with something new and interesting every 90 days isn't as easy as people think. And there's always something that's going on, always something different. And I have found your content to probably be the best content I've read because it's clear, it's understandable. You sent me an email a couple months ago with 5, packets of graphs and explanations and views and where we are in the economic cycle to what is an S-curve when it comes to artificial intelligence.
Sure.
Very deep thinking that is occurring in your firm, and you're sharing it with us. And that's what I really appreciate, because that makes us better at what we do. It helps us to put together really good portfolios that accomplish the goals set forth by each client. Because just like every advisory firm is different, every client is different.
Right.
At least we're not doing any of that program trading crap.
No.
I'm sorry, don't do it. Every client's different. We want to understand what their financial plan looks like, what their tax situation looks like. We get tax returns every year from their CPAs. We're actually reading the wills and the trusts. And that was interesting. And I thought it was, from my perspective, we do those things. I was surprised. I don't know whether surprise is the word, but I was pleased at your surprise because you're like, wow, you do all that.
Right.
And that made me feel like we really are different. We're just doing what I would want if I were the client. Not everybody does that.
I agree. And I think that's where this business gets very interesting, right? People think financial advisors are there to just make people money, right? Wholesalers are just there, or advisor consultants are there just to sell a product, right? But there's more to that. I think being a salesperson and being a support or a part of someone's team, I consider you part of my team, where hopefully it's mutual, where I want to be part of your team, right? Because I think we can't do this job alone, right? I have access to very smart people that manage a lot of money, and it might not be my expertise, but I'm able to speak to people that do that on a regular basis. If I could take that information, translate it into ways that you can then dissect it to your client because that product is a fit for their need, everybody wins, right?
Yes.
That partnership, I think, is something to be said about, again, the advisor-wholesaler relationship, because at the end of the day, we are a team to support your clients.
Fantastic. And it's so great because once you have that foundation of understanding, then when you're talking to us about a municipal bond fund, for example, we know that you're giving it to us straight.
Sure.
Every once in a while, I don't know if you know this, but I'll test you and I'll say, what do you have in the large cap value area? And you may or may not say, and I didn't do this, but you didn't say this, but you'd say, you know what? Don't use us for large cap value.
Mm-hmm.
That's not our thing, but we're really good with fixed income.
Sure.
So here's an idea. And then we dig deep. After you leave, we dig into the information that you've provided to really make sure that it's appropriate for our clients.
Right.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work also because we don't know what we don't know.
Sure.
We may already have our favorites, but then you'll come in with something, and then we have to really be open-minded and take the time to dig further to make sure that what we're recommending and what clients already have is best of breed.
Right.
And that's all we do. That's the whole point of it's what I would want my advisor to do.
Sure. And I think it's also fun about this business, right? There are times where I think constructive debate is really fun about this job, right? There are certain areas of the market or asset classes where one advisor or one consultant just are very adamant they like or don't like. I think that's what makes us better in the field of servicing clients, is having that constructive debate, whatever the topic may be, because there comes to a point where there's a happy medium where we learn from each other, where you could understand why you like or don't like something and vice versa. And I think that helps us do our job better, right? It helps me in the field to hear from advisors and masses of things that they like or don't like. Because even if I think it's amazing, if it's not going to resonate to the end client, nobody's going to win, whether it's the best idea or not. I think it's important to listen to each other in that sense, where that's what makes this job great, is wholesalers learn from advisors. Advisors can learn from wholesalers, from the people that we're speaking to behind the scenes. That's what makes this great about servicing clients, is that collaboration.
It's interesting because, as you know, we had a client event,
Right.
and we had a panel of economists, advisors, money managers. And it was interesting because, to your point, on the panel, sometimes people agree with us just because they want to tell us what they're telling us what we want to hear.
Sure.
And yet you guys weren't those people. You were pushing back and saying, we still believe in global diversification. There are fantastic industries. There's fantastic companies. And your Lauren Goodwin was an example of somebody who has traveled all over the world. The first time I talked to her, I think that she was just back from Dubai. And,
Yeah, she was. I think she flew in from Dubai to your meeting, which is great.
Exactly. So, it just, there is a lot to be said for people having boots on the ground.
Sure.
For them to see what is actually going on in these countries. And you guys give it to us straight and say, listen, we understand that it hasn't worked. Doesn't mean it's not going to work.
Right.
We're not, the windshield of our cars are a lot bigger than the rearview mirror for a reason. And that's what we want to focus on. The forward, what's going to, not, yes, history, yada, 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 we all say is no guarantee. but we have to look forward and understand on a fundamental level what's happening in the world around us. Yes, it might feel like it's pure chaos in Washington. You know what? For whatever it's worth, it's always felt like pure chaos.
Sure.
Every year there's something going on, isn't there? And having that perspective is so important. And what's cool is that, while we may not have the actual day-to-day resources and the data, you guys do, and you share them with us, which I really appreciate.
Happy to do it. And that's, I think, one of the value adds that we in the field as advisor consultants is your day-to-day needs to be focusing on the client, right?
Yep.
If I could take and help gather the data, gather the stuff that's happening in real time. Stuff is noise sometimes. Other stuff is important. How do we differentiate without having a crystal ball what we really need to focus on? Because we don't know until it happens, right? I think that's what's important for my role is to provide to you. If I could basically give you and other advisors out there in the field the substance that we think, at least from our perspective, is important to focus on within the markets, within portfolio composition, whatever the case may be, that helps you do your job. And if I could do it in bite-sized pieces where it's digestible, it's not confusing, and you can then implement it to within your client practice, that's what we pride ourselves in. We want to give you the solutions that you could translate to your clients.
I have two examples of that right off the top of my head. With what's happening in America and, down in Washington, I'm getting emails from many clients saying, this is pure chaos. I'm really worried about the economy. I want to move to cash. Should we move to cash, et cetera? And
Sure.
Some of the things that you've sent to us and my conversation with Lauren gave me the information I needed to send to these clients to say, yes, it feels chaotic, and sure, we might end up going through a recession and a market correction or even a bear market.
Right.
We've been here before. We're going to go through it again. Not to worry. We understand what you need on a personal level. We got this.
Right.
And that's what people need to hear. They need to understand. But also, we can't wing it. That's the thing. No. I will tell you, I think that all too often, or at least I find clients, people will come in and say, I feel like my advisor talks down to me. They're not listening to me, right? These emails, these people are really worried. Right. And I understand there's a lot to worry about from their perspective. So I want to recognize that, acknowledge it, acknowledge that other people are feeling that way, and maybe give them a perspective that they hadn't thought about. It's that last part that I need from you. Give me the material, give me the reasons why that, yes, these things could happen, but they're still going to be okay.
Right.
Again, that's the name of my book. Am I going to be okay? That's really the question that people are asking. And the other part of that is, because of that relationship and that ability and having that information at our fingertips, it also allows me, for example, to focus on things that you normally wouldn't think a financial advisor would focus on.
Sure.
For example, because I can actually hear what's going on with a client, a perfect example, I was meeting with a client, happened to be a woman, and she's going through some difficult times with the health of her husband, et cetera. And because I was able to completely focus on what she was saying instead of the pie chart and talking about the markets and all that kind of stuff, you know what her biggest concern was? The people cleaning her house weren't really cleaning her house. And so I said to her, pretend her name is Marge. I said, Marge, I got an answer for you. I have the best company. They clean better than anybody. They clean my house. They clean my office. She was so happy by the time we were done. That was her number one concern. But if I were so in my head about markets and interest rates and the Fed and all that kind of stuff, which, I have to know, and I do understand, I wouldn't have heard what was really on her mind. And that's what is really important about being there and being present, right?
I love that.
It's interestingly, because as I tell you that story and how happy that woman was, it made me realize that there are lots of needs Men have needs, women have needs,
Right.
and they're not always the same, right? So let's talk a little bit more about that.
Sure.
You mentioned before we started about International Women's Day.
Right. I love International Women's Day because we celebrate it every year. And I really think that there's a stigma with the female demographic in financial services, right? I don't think I'm fooling anybody when I say if you look around the investment world, it's a predominantly male-driven market. When people talk about finances, right? And I'm sure you see this very often, the male tends to handle the finances or handle the money. That has changed over time. And there are a lot more women that are handling the finances. There are a lot more women of power that are CEOs, et cetera. And I really think that it's important in this industry that a female who's the CEO of a company needs to be treated very differently, who unfortunately may have lost her husband. That's what I think we need to identify. And especially when you celebrate International Women's Day, you're celebrating women, right? So what I love about this business, and we're starting to see advisors are taking pride in understanding that different women have different needs. They want to be approached through the advisor community with different resources and different mindsets to support them. That's what I like to see in terms of the instillment of women in this business and women within finances, because we've come a long way since the general stigma of this is a male-dominated industry.
Oh, Lee, I got to tell you, when I first started, I would go to conferences, usually pregnant. And of course, you know, the person I was sitting next to me would look at me and look at my belly and say, "So, who are you here with?"
Right.
And of course, I knew what they were really thinking, that I was somebody's assistant.
Right.
And my answer was, I'm here with me, myself, and I.
Right.
And this baby wonder who's about to be born. So, and basically, I would then say, I'm here for the same reason you are, and that is to learn.
Sure.
How I can make a difference in the lives of my client. And for me, making a difference in the lives of our clients is what it's all about. To your point, I find women are really smart.
Right.
And they want to understand. They don't want to be talked down to.
Correct.
And they want to research things. So, you know, I don't want to be all fluffy and all that kind of stuff because, you know what? It's important to them. Women, I find, tend to be more insecure about their financial future.
Sure.
So we have to do the work. We have to demonstrate that we've done the research and give it to them in a way that they can digest and understand it. Don't talk down to them, and then don't fluff it off either, because it's important to them. So really being able to listen and recognize that they may have questions, encourage them to ask questions. There is no dumb question. I think personally, there's an advantage that I might have, not because I'm a woman at all. In fact, some of the best advisors that mentored me were men.
Right.
So this is not necessarily something that only women can do for other women at all. What I would say is that there's an advantage. My advantage is that I did not come into this business as a financial advisor. I didn't have a business background. I wasn't in the insurance industry. I came in as an ICU nurse.
Right.
And that, I never realized how valuable that would be, because I get it, because I didn't get it. And so I've got, as you know, a very deep bench here. I've got 31 really smart people. They've got MBAs and CFAs and CFPs, et cetera. And when we really get into the weeds in our investment committee meetings and we have a planning lab that we do once a month, I will invariably say something to the effect of, okay, guys, don't forget you're talking to a nurse here. Give it to me in words that I can understand.
Right.
Because I want you to get used to communicating that way with all of our clients, because they are not in our industry, and in order for them to feel confident,
right,
and feel comfortable with whatever it is that we're recommending, we have to give it to them in words that they can process. And we have to give them the information. Don't just fluff it off and say, just trust us, we're the advisor, aren't we great? No. Tell them why, not only what we're recommending, but why,
right,
and why it's relevant to that particular woman, whether they are somebody who works in a pharmaceutical company, on the front lines, anybody on the front lines like I was as a nurse, or the CEO of the company. You know what's really interestingly? I find that the higher up people get, the less they really understand.
Right.
Because they're so hyper-focused on their area of expertise that their personal finances, that's just kind of secondary. They're making really good money. Their cash flow is good. And what I think is kind of a shame is that people assume that they know. And even worse, they're kind of embarrassed to admit that they don't know. Because they're C-level people, right? They're doctors and lawyers and very smart people. They're smart in their field. And the one thing I think is really important, at least from my perspective and for the industry in general, is to let it be okay not to know.
100%. And one thing that you do, I have to give you credit for this because I don't think I'm fooling anybody to say you're very well recognized within this industry across the country, and you've earned that right because you've built yourself such a great business with great clients and a great team. But I think other than the numbers, right? Everybody focuses on how much did I make? How much did I lose? The human element of what you provide to your clients, I think, is invaluable, right? What I mean by that is there are things that I see you do that if I would tell other people in this business that you do this as a regular part of your day, other people's jaws would drop because it's not the norm. And I really think that that's what's impactful about managing people's, not just their money, but helping get to the point that they need to be, whatever that goal is for their longevity, is not only just helping check the box that you accomplished it, but having them smile along the way, having them feel good that they got there, because getting there sometimes can be scary, right?
Yeah.
You lose a relative or something happens that throws off your big plan picture. You bring the human element into this business, which I think is very important, where making the money or getting to the goal is important. But I think the journey of making clients comfortable is something that you do very well. So I thought it was important to bring that up because I think it's important that clients understand that getting to the goal is great, but the journey getting there and having an advisor like yourself to guide them there and do it with a smile on their face, I think that has its weight in gold. I think that's invaluable.
Yeah, thank you for that, Lee.
Sure.
I think that is exactly it. I mean, it's important. It's behind the scenes. So much of what we do is behind the scenes.
Right.
As you know, we have a scorecard for every client. I'm a nerd. I need to know that everybody's okay. And when you develop a business such as what we have here at Key Financial, it's, you can't necessarily be looking at everything all the time, every single day. So we had to come up with something different, systems where issues and opportunities just bubble up. We get alerts and alarms. This is all technology that I've put in the hands of my team. Sure, it's expensive as anything, I'm not going to lie. Mm-hmm. And boy, I would love to have kept those resources. We certainly would be a lot richer and we'd have a lot more money. But the outcomes for our clients is what drives every decision that I make for this firm. The interesting thing, and this is kind of a random point, and we talk about, International Women's Day, et cetera. The interesting thing about this is that, when I look back at all of the decisions that I've made over the years, it's always been so client focused. And
Sure.
I never realized what that would mean for my team. I had somebody come into my office about a year ago, and he's an employee, been with me for probably 4 years. And we were just talking about his time with us because I think it's important. One of the things, this is a sidebar, that I did many years ago, Lee, was I changed my title. And that sounds really weird because, Patty Brennan, CFP. I changed my title to CEO.
I love that.
And I got to tell you, how we identify ourselves does impact what we do. And so I feel like my role now as a CEO of Key Financial is to make sure that this is the last job that gentleman has, to create a culture and an environment where he feels like he has a purpose, that the purpose is greater than himself. Sure, he's going to make money. He's going to grow. We human beings have a need, I believe, and clients have a need to be making progress. Are we making progress? How are we doing? And to have the tools to be able to measure that.
Right.
Don't just talk out of our, yeah, you're doing really great. Okay, what does that really mean? Demonstrate it. Here's where you were. Here's where you are. For example, I talk about technology. We have a financial planning system. Every single year, we freeze the data and put it in a digital vault for clients to have.
Right.
So that 5 years from now, they can look at their financial plan and say, gee, at the end of 2024, we thought that we would have blank in the year 2029. And where are we? Do we have more? Do we have less? If so, let's dig deep. And that's really how many of our meetings work. So I think that changing my role to CEO for that gentleman, what he said to me was, people say that they care. You really do. Every decision, all the stuff that you've put in our hands shows that you walk the talk.
Right.
You actually really do care. And I think that people pick up on that. I really do.
We're in a very human business that has a lot of complexities, and clients are in good hands with you. So it's good to see.
And we're in good hands with you as well. The consulting
that
you've done for my firm has been so invaluable. In the previous podcast, I was bragging about my bracelet that I have. And this bracelet is literally a result of your consulting. Lee came in with a group of people from their firm, and we played a game. And the game was pick one word that's going to be your mantra for the year. And we talked amongst each other. People gave suggestions. And the suggestion I got was, Patty, you could be a little bit clearer about certain things. So if you are looking at my bracelet, my word for the year is clarity. Be really clear as it relates to communicating with clients, communicating with my team, and my friends that consult with us. I really appreciate you being here, Lee. Every time you're here, we talk. We talked before we started the cameras. We're talking afterwards. You're going to meet with my team. Mm-hmm. I just really appreciate the relationship we have.
Best part of this business is building the relationship. So I always appreciate you having me.
Thank you so much. And thanks to all of you for listening today and watching the video. I hope you have a fantastic day. As always, if you have any questions, we're here for you. We do these podcasts to be able to answer any questions you might have. I thought that opening the curtains, kind of, we're not Oz here. I'm not Oz. Open the curtains so that you can see how this is really done. We can't do what we do without people like Lee Cohen and New York Life Investments. So thank you for joining me. Thank you for allowing us to open our curtains so that you could see how the work is really done. I hope you have a fantastic day. And if you have any questions, go to our website, keyfinancialinc.com. Ask us whatever questions you might have. We'll do a podcast on it. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.